discuss about the chapter Our Environment. Our environment. You have often heard this word, right? But do you understand the actual meaning of it? No? Today let us see each and every aspect of it. To start with, we will begin with ecosystem. All the living organisms on this earth interact. With whom? They interact with the non-living things. So this interaction between the living and the non-living things forms an ecosystem. So there are two components of ecosystem, abiotic and biotic components. Let us start with the biotic component. It involves all the living organisms around you. For example, humans, which is the most common example. Whereas abiotic component involves all the non-living things around you. For example, the air, the wind, the temperature, soil, stone, etc. So this forms an ecosystem. Let me explain you this with the help of an example. You often go to park, but do you notice everything around you? Do you notice that there are the two components of ecosystem there? Now you'll ask me, what are those components and how do you get to know them? So the first component is the biotic component, okay, which is you yourself and also the small insects, the small birds, the animals which are present in the park. Whereas the abiotic component can be the stone, it can be the wind, it can be the temperature and etc. So this forms a ecosystem of a park. Food chain. Before starting with the food chain, you should know the types of organisms. So there are two types of organisms, producers and the consumers. Now let's start with the producers. They are the organisms which can prepare their own food with the help of process called as photosynthesis. For example, all the green plants. Whereas consumers, they are the organisms who depend on producers directly or indirectly for their food. And why do they depend? Because they cannot perform the process of photosynthesis. They have to depend on the plants for their food. Now, these consumers can again be classified into three types: primary consumers, secondary consumers and the tertiary consumers. Primary consumers, they are the organisms who depend on primary producers directly. For example, herbivores. Now, what are herbivores? They are the organisms which eat plants. For example, deer. Let's come to secondary consumers. What are these? They eat or they depend on the primary consumers. They do not depend on producers, they depend on primary consumers. So they can be either carnivores or omnivores. Now what are carnivores and omnivores? Carnivores, the organisms who eat other animals, are called as carnivores. For example, a tiger. Omnivores, the organisms who eat both plants as well as other animals, are called as omnivores. For example, humans. The third category is tertiary consumers. They depend on primary and secondary consumers. Again, they do not depend on producers, they depend on primary and secondary consumers. So they can also be either carnivores or omnivores. And the foremost important point is that they attain the top level in the food chain, the topmost trophic level in the food chain. Next, come to decomposers. Now what are these decomposers? They are the organisms who feed on dead and decaying matter. After an organism is dead, decomposers come into action. So they feed on these dead and decaying matter and produce something called as humus. Now what is this humus? Humus is also called as plant nutrient. Why? Because after the death, the decomposition produces materials which acts as a nutrient for the soil. So soil takes up these nutrients and enrich the plants with it, which helps in the growth of the plants. After knowing all the types of organisms, you are now fit to know about the food chain. How do you define a food chain? Food chain is defined as a sequence or a series in which one organism eats the other. And each level in this food chain is called as trophic levels. So, Producers attain the first trophic level, primary consumers attain the second trophic level, secondary consumers attain the third trophic level, and the last and the topmost trophic level is attained by the tertiary consumers. To understand this concept more clearly, let us see an example. Plant, grasshopper, frog, snake, and eagle. You must be wondering, from where does the food comes in the first step? So let me remind you of the process photosynthesis. It is the process by which green plants prepare their own food. Plants need sunlight for this process of photosynthesis. And sun is the ultimate source of energy. So this explains our 10% law, which states that energy is passed from one trophic level to another in the ratio of 10%. Whereas plants can only take 1% of the sun's energy. By understanding food chain, now can you tell me about the features of food chain? There are two features of food chain. Number one, the energy is unidirectional. The flow of energy is always from one trophic level to another. And the second feature is the energy at each trophic level gets diminished. Food web. When many food chains exist together, it forms a web kind of structure which is called as food web. Now you have learnt about many aspects of our environment. But do you think the environment remains the same as it was before? The answer is no. The environment keeps changing and we humans are affecting environment a lot. The human activities are depleting this ozone layer. Now do you know what is this ozone layer? Ozone. It is a blanket which surrounds our earth. It is made up of 3 atoms of oxygen. That is why it is called as O3. But it is deadly poisonous. But it also has some advantages. What are the advantages? It protects us from the UV rays of the sun, the harmful UV rays of the sun. Do you know how this ozone is formed? The oxygen atoms which are present in the atmosphere splits into free oxygen with the help of UV rays. So O2 will break down into O plus O. Now this single O combines with O2 to form O3, which is one free molecule of oxygen combines with oxygen to form ozone, which is O3. Because of our activities, this ozone layer is depleting and it causes global warming. How is it depleting because of us? Because of the electrical appliances which we use, they release chlorofluorocarbons or called as CFCs. These CFCs, when goes into the atmosphere, reduces the thickness of the ozone layer and causes its depletion. Ultimately, there is change in the temperature which leads to global warming. How can you manage the waste which we produce? First of all, you should categorize the waste. There are 2 types of wastes, biodegradable and non-biodegradable. Biodegradable waste. The waste which can be decomposed is called as biodegradable, whereas the waste which cannot be decomposed are called as non-biodegradable. Plastic, which is a type of non-biodegradable, should be reduced. We must follow 3R principle, which states reduce, reuse and recycle. Reduce. We must reduce the use of non-biodegradable substances like plastic. Reuse. We should always try to reuse the substances possible. For example, you can use the glass jars for keeping pulses. Third, recycle. You should always try to segregate the waste which can be recycled. For example, paper. So let's summarize the chapter. First, we studied about the ecosystem, the aspects of ecosystem which are the biotic and the abiotic components. Then we studied about the food chain and the food web. And last, we studied about the ozone and how we humans are affecting it.